project with several school districts, so I really appreciate them. I just wanted to take a few minutes just to tell you about a little bit about NIET. The mission of NIET, as you can see there, is to build educator excellence, so all students have the opportunity to succeed, and our vision is to put a high-quality teacher and a high-quality leader in every school in America. We work across the country, literally from Alaska to South Carolina, with school districts. We have been in Tennessee for numerous years. The team rubric, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the team rubric, is the NIET teaching standards rubric, and was adopted by the State Department many years ago, and we still work with school districts in Tennessee with that rubric today and various other things. We are a nonprofit, so we're funded through the Milken Foundation, and continue to work with private and public schools and charter schools and all schools across the country. The strategic planning process, as you can see, we went through several different things to get to the point where we're at today. We looked at our vision setting, or the district looked at vision setting. Do we need to change that, update that, look at the values of the school district? So that was our starting point. We identified the steering committee, which is here, and some members may not be here, but again, they did an outstanding job and tried to get, Dr. Adkins brought a cross-section of the school district together so that we make sure that we have everybody's voice heard. We did goal setting and action steps. We went through a SWOT analysis on the front end of that to get to the goals and action steps. Progress monitoring and implementation development plan was developed, and you have now tools that will show a little segment of that, but to make that plan a living, breathing plan. And then we'll have the implementation of that strategic plan starting in the coming school year. So if we look through step one, again, that vision setting, we met with Director Adkins and his team to look at the vision, mission of the school district and the values and goals, and ensure that we had that starting out, right on the front end. The mission and the vision of the school district is there, and I know you're aware of that, and kept that the way it was, and that was kind of our aiming point. The SWOT analysis, as I mentioned, if you've never been through a SWOT analysis, it's really a deep dive into what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, challenges, threats of the school district, and what will keep us from getting to our mission. So we went deep into those areas, into the various areas that you see. Then that led us to the goals that we developed as a team, or the team developed here, and then that led us to action steps, which from that point will lead us into activities over the next 5 years. The steering committee and the members here, again, you can see the cross-section that was brought together to work on the plan. We did start in January and met maybe once or twice a month throughout that time frame, all the way to where we're at today to get to the final report. So it was very step by step, I guess, if you will. The SWOT analysis was really, again, an in-depth look to get us to our goals and to our action steps. And then from that point, we tailored our implementation plan tools to what you need as a district. So what you'll see going forward is a way to kind of measure on a quarterly basis, or if you want to change that to a different time frame, then we can. It is a very adaptable tool that is yours to use however you want it, and we'll help you keep that updated as needed. So when we looked at our goals, goal one, and Dr. Atkins can speak a little bit deeper into this, but we looked at safe and healthy staff and students, and you can see, the goal there that was developed. We then had 2 academic goals that were developed to ensure that we were looking at numeracy and literacy and ways to close achievement gaps, and then college and career readiness to make sure that all students are ready to go into the workforce or go on to college as they need to do that, or post-secondary school to learn a trade. So again, the progress monitoring implementation plan, you can see there's a few questions. One, once the strategic plan is developed and implemented and starts, how will the district monitor that report back to the community and to the board? We've developed those tools. They're fully adaptable. They can be, put on the website. They can be, shared out at board meetings. They can be used in any way. How will that be measured? We worked with the steering committee to develop a rubric. It's on a 1 through 4 scale, or 0 through 4 scale, and you can see how that snapshot will look each quarter, and you can see a snapshot view, or you can drill deeper down into that as needed. So, the progress monitoring and implementation plan is the next step, and that will be operated by the school district. So again, very briefly, it's been a very powerful experience for us and me professionally. The team was very open, and it's very, very hard sometimes it's very easy to identify the things that you do well. But sometimes it's a little bit harder to identify the things that are challenges. But that's a healthy discussion, and the team really did that and came together to do that, and laid everything out on the table. And I can assure you they have the best interest of Lawrence County Schools in mind and in hand when they did this work. So I appreciate Dr. Adkins, or Mr. Adkins' leadership, and the team and the board for allowing us to come into the school district. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if Mr. Adkins wants to take that a little deeper, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I will say this, you can see the individuals who comprise the steering committee, and as we began meeting in January, some of our meetings were 2 and 3 hours, and when you look at those names on that piece of paper and the responsibilities that they have in a school system, for them to give that much time and focus on this work multiple times over the last 6 months speaks volumes about their commitment, as Mr. Cox mentioned, to this school system. And we were able to get really into a lot of discussions that were productive and positive, and our hope is that it's going to benefit our kids, our teachers, and this community. Thank you, Mr. Cox.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, if it's okay, I would just like to touch on a few things in the PowerPoint presentation from my notes, just to share with the board, and then I will pick up on another one. On the mission of the schools and communities working together for student success, I underline student success. I wanted to have in my mind, what is student success? And college and career readiness, preparing our students for success begins in pre-K, kindergarten, not when they join high school and start going into career tech courses. We're preparing them when they're 4, 5, and 6 years old, walking into our buildings, and when they walk across our stage at 18. So that student success for me is going to look different for each one of them, but each one of them is going to have an opportunity to experience success. And I believe in that strongly, as do as members of the steering committee. On the SWOT analysis, some of the challenges we recognize were internal challenges and some of the hurdles that we're going to have to jump, but also some external challenges. We are at the mercy of the legislature at times. We are at the mercy of the Department of Education. But at the end of the day, we are the leaders, and we have to focus on the students and teachers in this community. And that was evident in our discussions as well. On our safe and healthy staff and students goal 1, I emphasize safety. I think that is becoming the first priority for school districts as the nation is changing and taking on other challenges. We have to ensure that when our kids come to school, it's a safe environment. Their parents have to feel good and know that we're taking safety seriously, and we're doing that. Instructional materials, high quality instructional materials in ELA in 2021. Math, the board adopted that for 23-24, and we're looking at social studies and science 25, 26, 26, 27. Facility upgrades are taking place, technology in the classrooms, school-based therapists. We have students that need our help and assistance, and we're addressing those needs. And school safety, as I mentioned, first and foremost on the minds of everyone. and that is important to us in this county. I think the board has recognized that for years, and I appreciate that. As we get into goals 2 and 3, speaking of academics, the work that we're doing with our academic interventionist, Mrs. Ridgway has found dollars through ESSER to give us an additional 1 year of interventionists working in K3 and then 4th and 5th. We're using those dollars for our students, and that's going to help our teachers. We're looking at academic leads to go out and work with our teachers beginning next year. Class sizes are important, and we've tried to reduce those, and additional staff. Since the beginning of the pandemic and when we received federal dollars, we began immediately getting people into our buildings to work with our kids. We knew that 9 weeks off and that hybrid schedule was going to be difficult. That was lost opportunity for learning by our students, and we've tried to fill those gaps in the last several years. College and career readiness, as I mentioned, starts in kindergarten. The ACT, the importance of that, as one administrator in the system said, ACT starts in kindergarten, and we believe that. Early post-secondary opportunities, we're well over 1,500 for this year. Our students in Lawrence County, over 1,500. We were around 980 last year. Expansion of CTE offerings. We're continuing to meet with TCAT, local industry and what they need and what they'd like to see us have, and our STEM program. So I just wanted to touch base on those things and share with the board just notes that I had made on Mr. Cox's presentation. So, Mr. Chairman, on in the other document, the 5-year plan that Mr. Cox put together for us, if we can maybe start on page 9. I just touched on these briefly, but you can see there the action steps and then the performance metrics. And each member of the steering committee, with the help of others, help define those. What is it that we're wanting to do? And then when we come up with what we want to do, how we're going to measure it. I think that's important. I'll be happy to answer or have the members of the team answer any questions you may have on goal 1, the action steps or performance metrics.
I have a question, Mr. Atkins.
Yes, sir.
On your performance metrics, they're the 100% of schools engaged in positive school climate activities. Can you just give me an example of what that's referring to?
That will come from Coordinated School Health and Mrs. Golden, and she's here to speak to that.
So we've been working with something called RTS, it's basically positive behavior. So if you've had, no occurrences, office referrals, things of that nature, then you get with it. So it would be those type of things.
Thank you.
I will mention on the right below that, Mr. Daniel, behavior intervention, implement innovative strategies to address student needs. You can see where we think that's important because we're looking at a retention of 90% of teachers and leaders in the school district. We want to keep our people who we know and we know their heart and what they believe in education working in our buildings. And we all know that we're in a competitive market with salaries and districts and trying to get teachers in a shortage, but we have more and more people this year applying for jobs in Lawrence County than we did last year and the year before that, and that is a testament to the board's action with salary schedules and improving that for all of our employees.
So I heard recently, I don't know if it's been in the past that you've done this, but here recently in the past month, I saw several teachers retiring or giving up the teacher profession, but it's in my eyes, it's not time. It's not like they're getting out too early. What are we doing to improve that? Like a 15-year teacher is retiring. And that why? I mean, maybe I'm looking at it different, but
Well,
I've always thought profession of teaching, you go 25, 30, 35 plus, and now all of a sudden they're dropping down to 20 and 15.
well, and you may have some who do want to make a career change, and you may have some who started later in their life to begin teaching. I go back to right now, you max out at 20 years in the Lawrence County school system. And the board has taken action to say, we want to improve that, and we bumped it up to 25. And Mrs. Elledge and I are already looking at what's the next step. Is it 26 to 30, or is it 26 to 27? I'm of the opinion, had the board not taken that action, we might have had more retirees. And I think that's a positive, that we've been able to address those extra years of service in the system, and that's keeping people with us that could have walked away, who could have retired, and they have 30 years, but they're being paid at 20 years. They wanted to stay around and work for us a little longer.
Go ahead, Brenda.
What do you think about, and I've heard different people mention what I'm fixing, and it's not really a good thing to say, but I think that maybe the discipline of the kids is having a lot to do with your teachers. I mean, I know all of that starts at home.
Sure.
But there is a problem with it.
Yeah, and I believe that is one of the byproducts of what we dealt with in 2020, but we're not the only district. I think when you take a look at what we've tried to do with our school-based therapists, our social workers, we're trying to get into that, but discipline nationwide, statewide, to the point that when superintendents are in rooms with lawmakers, we're talking about, we've got to get a handle on discipline. We've got to do a better job of that. We have our elementary schools, I met with them last week, and they're asking for ISS teachers. You know, it is something that we are facing here as well as other districts.
I've had some substitutes say, we are not going to sub anymore. We will not listen to the language and the way the kids are acting. We're not going to do it.
And I will say this, I say it to folks all the time, and people who have not worked in Lawrence County and worked in other districts, when they come and work for us, they talk about how good it is. I think we're accustomed to it being a certain way. As I tell them, our worst day is somebody's best day, and we don't have a lot of bad days. We have students they're students, but overall, people are excited to be in Lawrence County, but that is a growing concern across the nation.
That's a growing problem. Well, how could we better help our teachers with that problem?
I think it's probably a number of things. Of course, smaller class sizes, and we're addressing that in the elementary levels. We have a program that we implemented, was it last year or this year? Capturing Kids' Hearts. It's a program, and I see that when I'm out in the school, the benefit of that. And I can speak of one school, Ingram Sal, where it has made such a difference in that. And again, you're going to have discipline. It's the type of discipline, and you do have some other challenges that students bring to school with them that we take as someone was telling me today. You know, a carpenter goes and buys a bucket of nails. They come across a bent nail, they just throw it out. Our buckets, we can't throw those nails out. We have to work on those kids.
I'm well aware of that, because I know of some kids, and I've talked with some people that actually a young man came to my house. I gave him some chickens, and he was one of those kids that was kind of on the line. Some of the teachers got with him, got to working with him, and he's doing real well.
Oh, yeah.
He's in school, passing, doing well. But then on the other hand, you've got some problems that are there that the teachers can't address. They're going to have help.
Yeah, they're going to have help, and we're shouting that from the mountaintops in meetings. But I'll take an opportunity to just say this: we are blessed to have the difference makers that we have in Lawrence County. We're blessed beyond measure to have people who make a difference every day in the lives of our kids.
Chairman Caruso, can I add an opinion back to your question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
The 15-year veterans who are leaving. I know of a few personally who have left this year. And I think the market around about us is big. They're not leaving because they don't like education. They're leaving because the workforce is knocking on people's door with a big pocketbook, and it's hard to turn that down.
That is true, you're right. That's correct.
And, you know, it's not because
Yeah.
they wasn't out looking, they wasn't mad, but
Yeah.
they got that phone call on that door,
Yeah.
hey, would you be interested?
That's true.
And here's you X amount of thousands
Yeah.
more dollars.
Yeah, sometimes money speaks.
Just like property. They knock on your door every day and want to buy your house.
I mean, I know of two specifically that happened, so.
Goal 3, if we can take a look at that. This is where our educational leads, our additional interventionists, and that is something when Mrs. Ridgway and I meet with the elementary principals, and I ask them, what is it that I can be asking of the State Department, the General Assembly, the Commissioner of Education, and it is continue to fund our interventionists, find ways to keep these folks in our buildings. And that was an idea that we came up with near the end of, I guess, the start of the pandemic, whenever it was, that we wanted to get people in our buildings working with kids immediately after that. And that's what I hear most from the elementary principals, is we would like to have these interventionists remain in our building as the dollars dry up. And I'm doing my part to let them know, this is, you asked me what could we do to make a difference and help kids, and I've said, give us money and give us personnel. If we can't do that, then come hold us accountable. But if we can do it, don't jerk the money out from under us when it dries up. Look at what you did, how well it was, and your job as a legislator, the governor, and the Commissioner of Education is to fund those successful programs. And I'm happy to have anybody answer any questions on Goal 2 and 3, as I didn't ask for on 2.
I did have a question, Mr. Atkins. I can't remember, let me go back to somewhere. Okay, back on Goal 1, really, the assess the number of referrals and services provided by the school-based therapists and social workers. What is that going to look like? And is that something that we've already seen? I know you shared, Ms. Golden shared with me some data early, or shared with the board some data early on. Is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about something a little bit different?
We may have that that may be special ed and coordinated school health and school-based therapy and student services, and that would tie back into what Mrs. Jacobs was talking about. If any three of you would like to answer that for Mr. Daniel, that'd be great.
So we look at our referrals that come in, where our social workers are putting in on our Family Resource Center. So we're looking at those numbers. And we're also looking at, and attendance plays in this too, with attendance and discipline, because we're seeing a lot of issues in the schools. And, having said that, once they reach a point to where they're going to need a disciplinary hearing, when I come in, that's when we start pushing. If they haven't already got a therapist or a social worker, we start pushing, and that's when we start making that connection with our social workers, our parents, and then our therapists. Because sometimes, those kids, they continue to get in trouble. They fall through the cracks a lot of times. And so once it comes to our attention at central office is when we start pushing that. And then that's when I start talking to Jimmy about making sure that we're providing services for them.
So, do you feel like that it's coming to you, do we still have time, or do you feel like by the time it hits you here at the central office and we're going to start pushing, do you feel like, I guess, are we intervening early enough?
I think so. I think we're intervening early enough. And we're seeing the behaviors with smaller children, like Mr. Atkins said, we need some ISS teachers in the elementary. We're seeing a lot of behaviors that we've not seen, that we usually see with high school students. We're seeing it in the elementary. And we also have a lot of students on the special ed side that need behavior plans, and we're seeing a lot of students that need a behavior plan with our special ed.
And this is tied back to what Ms. Jacobs says, and I've had conversations with my wife and other educators, and I'm at a loss. We all see it. We go to Walmart, and you see a 3, 4, 5-year-old being talked to like they're being talked to. What do you do with that in the classroom? And how does a 5-year-old know that I can't do that when they're hearing that they're all growing up? And so as a teacher, as an education system, what do you do about that?
Well, I can tell you, as I mentioned earlier, capturing kids' hearts and the social contract. Many of our students come to us and they're a product of their environment. Many of those are a positive product of their environment, but others come from environments where that's the normal. And the social contracts and the things that they're implementing in the early grades are helping narrow that and bring them in. But it's a continuous job, because 7 hours with us and the next 10 or 12 at home with others erases a lot of the work we do, but our teachers continue to do that the next day and the next day. And it's, I guess it's a battle of attrition. We want to keep putting that positive in front of them the best we can.
I think another thing that we're seeing too is we have zero support from home. Parents aren't supporting teachers, you know, and it's, why did you know, fuss at my child? Why did you do this? I mean, we have zero support. And then a lot of times we have parents that call board members and start complaining about what, you know, we've done in the school system. And, you know, having y'all support really helps because, I mean, you can't teach when you've got somebody acting like that. And it's not fair to the others. So, you know, that's, and, you know, we see a lot of friends, moms and daughters, and they're friends with their children. It's not a mother and a daughter, it's best friends. And they come up here, I probably, anyway.
I got
They
you.
come up here with their hair colored, both of them, and they're all giggly, and this is the mom and the daughter, and then they're fussing because, you know, she's gotten in trouble for something, and, you know, we're the bad guy. And we're just, I mean, we're trying to help.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, going back to what Mr. Atkins says, you get a bucket of nails, and just because, it's not fair to the rest of the nails in that bucket. You need to be able to teach them and stuff, but it's also not fair, you can't throw out the Benton. And you can't I can't imagine as a kindergarten teacher with a 5-year-old going on a tirade, how do you handle that? Because that's not abnormal to that 5-year-old. That's how they have been taught. And how are we to expect and how are we to discipline a kid when they're doing what they've been taught to do? And again, when you discipline, you have no support at home. Anyway, we'll go on.
I don't
I'm
talk
sorry.
forever.
And I think, I'll say this and we'll move on. I think Mrs. Cope, Mrs. Golden, and Mrs. Jaeger will tell you there are kids that have those stories, but you may see them in the 7th grade and they're entirely different because of the work every day. The capturing kids' heart, those positive reinforcements, putting good people around them, having that friend, having somebody you connect with in school does change. You know, it can help a lot of kids. So we may not get that nail straight, but we do get it back out there where it's usable.
Going back to what Mr. Daniels said about the 4 and 5-year-olds, your older ones, when they used to ugly talk and this, that, and the other, when their parents say that's their First Amendment right, you have that happen too.
Goal 4, is that where we are? And that is our career and technical area, and Mrs. Watson addressed that. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, our early post-secondary opportunities, we were performing exceptionally well last year, and we felt good about 1,000 post-secondary opportunities. But Mrs. Watson continued to push this year, and we're topping 1,500. And that's impressive. Our students are getting those hands-on activities. They're making themselves marketable when they leave us. And as you look through that, the action step, the 3rd bullet down, I mentioned in my opening comments about ACT and college and career readiness all beginning in kindergarten. And you can see there, develop a K-12 framework for ACT, college and career readiness benchmarks. Our focus when they come through the door, we need to have them ready when they walk off our stage and going out into the community, out into the workforce, college, whatever it is. And this plan of ours is to address that going forward, continue to address that, I should say. Any questions on any of that information I've shared with you?
Mr. Atkins, do we have, because I know we've implemented already an ACT prep in the high schools and stuff, do we have any data showing the benefit of that? Or if that has been successful, or are we seeing increases or improvements because of what we implemented? Or are we seeing a plateau that we need to readjust and do something different?
I think you'll see it cyclical because it's going to be a different set of kids every year that you will assess that to. Some are going to be really good test takers. Some are going to be first-time test takers of the ACT. But I want to say last year we saw an improvement at all 3 high schools on the ACT. The goal set by the state was an ACT composite score of 21 several years ago. And that's difficult to meet when you have first-time ACT test takers who take it because they have to do it to graduate. I think if you took the kids in Lawrence County who are planning on going to the next level, junior college, trade school, or whatever, and you put them up against a similar group of kids, you would see that our students are performing well above that 21.
You have to remember too, when you look at ACT data, it's what we call lag data. So the data that we'll get this year that goes in our accountability will actually be the graduating seniors from last year, not 2023. It's actually 2022. They do that for the grad rate and the ACT data from the state to make sure anybody that tested in the summer after they graduated or graduated through the summer, that their data is included.
And what you will see in that lagging data is the current data. You'll see principals at all 3 high schools recognizing students who moved up from one ACT score to another. Social media, prizes, whatever, letting them leave school early, whatever it is, knowing that that data is lagging, but while you have them here, you need to continue to emphasize the importance of that in those ACT prep courses and so forth. So, but we do work in the rears in that.
And the state also allows us to do, it's called the best of score.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we get to use that score versus just the last score. So it just takes them a longer time to compile all that data together.
That's unfortunate that you're having to deal with basically almost 2-year-old data.
Yeah, yeah.
What good is that?
Yeah. The last page there, or page 13 of 14, the information at the top of that page, that will be provided an electronic copy that we will share with the board, so you will have access to that. Mr. Cox is also going to give us access to it so that we can put it on our website so that the community can look at the things that we're doing, and we can share that out in meetings, engagements that I have with community leaders and so forth. So that will be coming to you in a copy where you can see it and dig into it if you like. And that's really what I have on this. Anybody on the committee that would like to speak to any of the plans, the goals, the actions, what we're trying to do, have anything you'd like to share about it, share with the board, we're open to that if you'd like.
I think we just have to keep in mind that the 5-year strategic plan is the overview. So we take our yearly district goals from this 5-year strategic plan, and then the schools take their goals from our district goals. So really, this is the overview of what drives our yearly goals for the district and the schools.
And I do want to comment again on Mr. Cox and NIET and the great work that he did helping us and all the folks there. It was a lengthy process and it was in-depth, but a successful process. And we've used a lot of federal dollars over the last several years and done a lot of great work, but our use of federal dollars for this project, I think, will add great value to the system, and it gives us a starting point and a way to measure and assess and correct as we're moving through these next 5 years. So thank you, Mr. Cox and NIET.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Anybody have any further questions regarding this? Very well, moving on, and I'll keep the momentum going with. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to share with a few minutes of capital projects, facilities, because as we work the academics, it goes hand in hand with having quality facilities and upgrading our facilities and addressing the growth in Lawrence County. I think we all know there's growth on the north end. I'm hearing of some growth in the south end as well. Our schools right now for registration for next year, we're seeing a lot of grade levels fill up, which is going to require us to go out and hire more personnel. We understand that growth is coming, and this document that I shared with you first in November of 21 and then updated for this meeting, the lowercase topics were things that I proposed at that time. the all caps is what I'm looking at now, that we need to start thinking forward in some of this, and mainly at the north end. But I did want to share that with the board. I did want to kind of give you an analysis on, like, say, South Lawrence, number 2 there. Square footage in December of 2022 was at 289 a square foot, and by April of that, it was 339. So when it doesn't sound like a lot until you're building a massive structure. And so, for example, the gym at Loretta was around $7.1 million. In April, if we would have tried to build that same gym, it was guesstimated that it would be an additional $1.1 million. So we hit at a good time with that, but we have to be thinking about future growth and how we're going to address that. And I think these growth scenarios and accommodations, I just wanted to share with the board so you could get an idea and then give me feedback on what we think we need to do, what we need to address. No action is needed on this. This is just for us to discuss and talk about. It can be at another time. It doesn't have to be tonight. But I did want to get it in your hands and let you see kind of what was going through my head. I also have a document that Mr. Tucker is working on for me, the capital projects planning. As we fix a roof in 2023, we want to calculate out when is that roof needed for repair. It might be 2050, we don't know, but we do want to have something in there that says we did this in 2023, the 20 years from now we need to be planning, so that the board then and the director then can have an idea of what's coming and what's needed. And then we also have a pre-planning document that it's in-house. Mr. Jones, Mr. Tucker, myself are working on with some pre-planning at Summertown High School, an athletic facility and future classrooms at that campus, that as we develop that more, I will share with the board as well. So three documents there that I will put in your hands in the coming weeks.
So I called Mr. Atkins earlier today, and I hope everybody had a chance to look at this and kind of mow it over. And I know as you get more in depth of this, you'll have some questions. So, just shoot them an email and say, but I do want to emphasize on one of these, and it's coming up, and it's like Kaufman. We need to address it pretty quick. Is that keep going up? No, go to 4. Is the Barnett Center.
The J.C. Barnett. Oh, there it is.
That that building is old. It's dilapidated. It needs a lot of money going into that. So just keep in mind, what are we going to do with it? Is it worth to rebuild it or restructure it for the amount of employees or children we have in there, or mow it over and build something else? Because I'm sure the land is a lot more worth than the building it sits on. So just keep that in the back of your mind going forward in the next, I want to say 3-4 years, but it's going to be quicker than that.
Yeah, and it's the one building that structurally is sound. It's things like windows that are original windows, or windows that may have been replaced in the mid-70s. It is doors, it's high ceilings, but structurally it's a solid building. We don't have any issues with that. It's the other things that we're needing to do. And when you look at that building and the enrollment there, it addresses some of the things that Mrs. Jacobs mentioned tonight, and the counselors. Some of our students who need additional services and opportunities to be worked out of some difficult situations, those folks there provide that for them, and we want to keep doing that, but we do have to invest some dollars in there in the coming years, and that's going to create a challenge for this board. You invest in a small student enrollment, and you pass on a larger student enrollment as things are needed, and that's going to be difficult, but I did want to have that on there for you to see that we're going to have to address that building. Structurally sound, $339 a square foot. That's probably more now. It could go down, but to build something there, it's going to be an expensive cost.
Chairman Caruso,
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to address the rest of the board. This is work session to bounce off ideas, but what's on the screen now, I have had conversations multiple times with Mr. Atkins. And if you're unaware, there is a 245 or 240 plus development fixing to get underway on Gillum Stretch. If that comes in, I don't know what to estimate. Let's estimate we get 100 kids out of that from K-12. Summertime, what we have done at Summertown with the building project, we have addressed an overcrowded issue, and it's nice, we love it, it put us to where we need to be today. It did not put us where we need to be to accommodate 100 plus more kids.
I agree with wholly.
And
That's correct, that's
I
right.
first bounced off these ideas, I'm not gonna take ownership of it, it's not my idea, but the only thing that I can see that we can do as a board, or first thing we cannot do is wait till we're overcrowded and then try to dig us out of a hole because we can't afford it. We have got to set ourselves up, starting today, with a plan on what are we gonna do in 5 years when we've got that influx of another 100 plus kids up there. And the only thing, what Mr. Atkins has presented here is, I mean, that is the answer, to my opinion, because we can't afford to build a new high school. But if we do what's on this sheet right here, and we move athletic facilities to that property, and then we've opened up the footprint that we can now put additions on that campus, then that gives us room to grow for exponential, 20 plus more years that none of us will worry about it. The next generation behind us will. But I just know, and it's our concern, it's Summertown's concern, the infrastructure at Summertown's going to struggle. It's coming. I talked with Executive Morgan. It's not a if, or it's not a when, it's just whenever they get started.
Summertown Orchards, is that what you're talking about? 245 acres, multi-generational, self-sustained community.
Yes. Yes.
Even have medical facilities on
They're
it.
going to have a shopping center and stuff like that, but it's not, it's almost like sounds like the villages in Florida, but it's
Yes.
not geared to be a retirement community. It's
No.
just going to be a community. And you will have the
Children.
influx from the north, moving down here to the south, in that close proximity of Murray County, Spring Hill, Franklin, we're working up there because we all know it doesn't, when you're on the north end of the county, you're in downtown Franklin in an hour.
Another thing to go along with that, there's 40 new apartments going in at Loretta, plus they just opened up 12 or 15 apartments there, and houses going on every corner.
Yeah,
So
Executive
Loretta's
Morgan,
gonna have the same thing.
Executive Morgan, David Morgan told me the southeastern corner, the Bonner Town, the Appleton, that corner is starting to see growth coming out of Huntsville. And we're starting to see new homes and properties and stuff built down there. I'm just saying, we have got to stay out in front of this, because if we do what we did, what got handed to all of us, and we wait, we will not be able to, we won't have the money to address it.
And Murray County is busting at the seams. They've got to go somewhere. And they're going to come south.
We just have to start putting ourselves, or it's my opinion, with Summertown, and watch it closely in the south end, we have to put ourselves in position to address this. And this athletic facility, let's start getting the fields off of that property, which means an investment of this board and the county commission, as they done reported to us. County commission's done offer $700,000 for the football program. But we've got to implement that strategically in phases, so we're not looking at 5 years of now what we want to do and trying to do it all at once, because we won't be able to accomplish that.
John, we tried with the building program many years ago, to try to get those things built.
2015.
And they were, 20 million, 21 million or something when we first started that, and then what did we wind up paying for this time? At Summertown, and I can't remember what we finally paid this time to get the
Additional
It's Summertown,
classrooms and all.
right.
Yeah, it probably would have
it was-
been, with sewers and all that, it probably been close to $9 million, maybe, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly.
But the price went way up,
Prices.
and the commission never,
Never even
bought
voted on
in.
it.
No.
Ricky, you've been
And that-
quiet,
that-
go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ricky.
We say this year after
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
but I see it showing up in number 2. Catch Blankley. This is just one man's opinion, but I would certainly try to do, at least open it up for somebody else to bid on something. I know we have the plans, and I know we paid $400 and something thousand for those plans when they were made. I'm assuming they belong to the Lawrence County school system. I don't see the need, if you do the same thing and expect to get different results, you're kidding yourself if you do it over and over and over. Now, somebody put a time restriction on them that if they weren't finished in a certain time on future things, they paid a monetary cost for it. But, you know, years ago, there was a group out of Nashville that came down and looked at those plans for the 2 high schools. And one morning, they worked for 3 hours and came up with $4 million in savings. We need to do something different. I don't know how the legal situation would be, but open that up for somebody that has some cost saving. I mean, you know, the 2-inch, just an example, the 2-inch copper line going from the meter to the new facilities at Summertown when you only have a 3/4 hole coming out of the meter base. That's just one example. Crushed pipes, electrical conduit beside the building that had the spray foam insulation and glued a piece back on top of it. May last forever, but give somebody else an opportunity to look at those plans and see if we can't save money. We don't know. We don't know if we can save money because we go this same route every time.
Competitive bidding.
Go ahead, Royce. You had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, is Summertown still talking about incorporating, or is that off the table now?
I haven't heard anything about it in some time.
I saw that somewhere.
And I have,
Mr. Atkins put it on the.
Yeah, that's where I saw it.
yeah, and
I haven't heard anything either, and I just, it seems like there'd be a lot of advantages if they could do that.
and I've heard that, and I
You
have,
say incorporate. Royce, as I understand it, and I'm no lawyer, but Murray County has put their future growth plans to the Lawrence-Murray County line. I had one of the people that was on the committee 7 or 8 years ago. I had his students in class, his children in class, and he called me and he said what Murray County or Mount Pleasant was going to do, extend their growth plan to the Lawrence County line. I have been told there is a state law on the books that 2 cities can't be incorporated within 5 miles of each other. If that be the case, and that held up in court, Summertown could never be incorporated.
See, I was wondering about this development you're talking about, the 245 units or something. What are they gonna do with sewage and water?
Well, that's a good question. We all wonder that.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do with runoff? That's what the county executive was trying to do, is control, because all these developments are killing. Mr. Mabry's got a farm next door to this, and now you go put 245 homes in the farm next door to what he's trying to farm, all them houses and all that, that's gonna run across his property and take out all his topsoil. There's nothing to stop that. There's no code, there's nothing there to, me as a developer, to protect Mr. Mabry's farm. I'm gonna come in and build 245 acres, I don't care what happens.
That's exactly what I'm saying, and that's why you would want to have some kind of control over that development. Seems to me like.
That's called the county commission, Mr. Snyder.
It is.
And let them know, because I've let them know.
Isn't he working on that now?
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
On that, and I don't know it to be a fact, I wasn't at the meeting, but there were people at the county commission that wanted to put a code regulation in the county. Ms. Jacobs can tell you more about that, but you have to have a permit to do everything. There's no longer ability in Murray County to build a home with rough lumber. It has to be inspected lumber. I'm sure there's many, many more that she can inform you. The question that was asked at this particular push to put codes in, what about the Amish? They build with rough lumber. It was said, oh, we can't do anything about that. That is a protected group, which is fine. But when you start putting codes out in the county, ask someone in Murray County what it's like to try to build a home. And I defer to Brenda. She knows more about that than anybody, I imagine.
They put a ceiling fan on a back porch, it has to be inspected.
Mr. Chairman, can I go back to one of the things that Mr. Mabry was talking about and add to, you know, when we was talking about Cox Binkley, the company, kind of related to that, but not directly related to it, is myself, Mr. Mabry, I believe, Mr. Atkins, you know, we joined, it was open to all of us, I think, but we, of course, since it was a school in our district, we joined the walkthrough and the checkoff of Summertown High School. And when we did, I opened up a closet, and this closet was stacked floor to ceiling with excess tile. Now, we utilized that tile, redid the boys' locker room and a few other areas, but I guess what I tell you that to say, and I've had this conversation with Mr. Atkins, I've had this conversation with County Executive Morgan. As a county, as a school system dealing with this county, I would like for us to entertain, before we, or next time we go into a building program, that we hire a project manager. We've hired Mr. Atkins, and he's got his staff, and they have got enough to do. We need somebody, now, they had, George was up there, he was the site manager, but he worked for the construction company. He's out to look for the best interest of the construction company. We need somebody looking out for the best interest of Lawrence County school system and Lawrence County. And somebody saying, hey, George, you know, we needed so many 100, 1,000 square feet of tile, and you've got 4,000 more. Why? Send it back. I'm not paying for that. You know, the issues that he talked about, the concrete issue that I had to bring to Michael Atkins, you know, I'm bombarding him, Mr. Mabry is, Nikki, you are about Kaufman, we're bombarding him. He's got a school system to run. I just think Lawrence County school system will come out money ahead, would probably pay for that person's salary, or they would pay for themselves and the cost savings that they would save this school system, this county, if we had somebody that's their sole job is to manage these products and not have to piggyback them on all of the supervisors, and they're, you know, they've got enough to do without managing projects. But
Mr. Crusoe, Mr. Atkins, would you share the scenario of the sink in the training area of CTE with the rest of the board?
Sure. I would want to mention something that Dr. Mabry mentioned. He shared this with me some time ago about maybe a misunderstanding of our contract with Cox Binkley. Before my time, there may have been an opinion that we had a contract with them. We do not. We do not have a contract with them. We're free to use whomever, whenever, and however. And since Dr. Mabry, my conversation, every chance I'm out at a conference, I go to every construction and architecture firm there and get their card. I've got them in my office so that when the day comes that we do have more, like we did when we hired an attorney, we put that out to a number of people. So I want to make that public that Dr. Mabry and I had that conversation, and I'm working on that for him.
To add to that, I know what you're talking about. We mentioned this once before, and they told us that it would cost X amount of dollars, remember, if we went away from them, that they had some kind of contract or the plans or something that we couldn't
Yes,
just go out.
We were told that.
We were told that.
Yes, well, I remember that we couldn't get out of that
We
contract.
couldn't get out of it, and
But there
we
was no
questioned it
contract
at
there.
the time.
No,
But if you would share the one about the sink, That is an interesting little story.
Well, we had an issue that Mr. Henson brought to my attention and said, look, in our career tech room, classroom up there, we're going to have our nursing ed program in there, and we need a sink, a drain, and some other things in there, but the plans don't call for it. And I said, all right, I will ask architecture and construction what it will cost. And they came back with about, I think it was $17,000 or $21,000 to do something that was around $3,000. And most of that was in the material. But as we get into those big firms, they have to have a lot of people touch those plans and look at those plans, and that becomes costly, whereas we address that matter ourselves. But that's, I believe, what Dr. Mabry's talking about,
And George put a drain tile before they poured the concrete.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they ran water lines through the ceiling for a minimal charge.
Yeah, it was very, very small amount. But I believe that supports what Mr. Daniel is saying about a project manager. As we grow in Lawrence County, as we do need to strongly consider that, whether I'm here or you guys are here, whomever, there needs to be a project manager, because that is needed. And having lived through this now, I will tell you, had I known what I know now when we started this, that would have been my recommendation to you, is that we put somebody in that understands that world. Mr. Brown has to keep the lights on and the ceilings from leaking and the air conditioning working. He's not a project manager for that, but that's something we should strongly consider.
To give y'all credit, I did see Mr. Tucker over Kaufman several times, and I, walked around checking. I don't know exactly what he was doing, and I showed him a few things, and I know he wasn't a project manager, but I know he was
And
trying to be involved. But I agree with what they're saying.
I've added that to the future growth scenarios as a project manager as we develop, and I'll share that out with you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about system growth?
So I do, because for some reason I'm absent-minded, I guess, but scroll all the way back up, if you will, Ms. Ridgway, to the South Lawrence and Leona. So now, were we really looking at, and do I understand what you've got here, that we were going to move 6, 7, and 8 from Leona down to South Lawrence, and move K5 from South Lawrence up to Leona? And have an elementary school in Leona and a middle school at South Lawrence? Was that what this was proposing?
I think this was just an idea that as we grow and we wanted to have a true middle school, South Lawrence meets the needs. They have the space. They could handle a middle school. But if we do this, it's going to be more classrooms that would need to be constructed at Leona. But we then face the challenge of busing, the 90 minutes on a bus, and there's some of those areas. But I wanted to share with the board is that would be a possibility. But with that possibility is going to come more buses and more bus drivers, because we can't keep them on the bus more than 90 minutes at a time. That to me was a reasonable solution, because South Lawrence is much bigger and we could accommodate.
So was this still kind of supporting the middle school model that we tried to go when Mr. McDaniel was here and adopted?
It would go back into that. We didn't adopt that model when I first got in, because we had money set aside for classrooms at South Lawrence that weren't needed because we had empty classrooms. And so we diverted those funds to more capital projects down there.
Mr. Caruso, Mr. Hartsfield, Ms. Jacobs, you and me remember when the building plan first came into play, Dr. Heath's idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, was to have K5, 6, 7, and 8 throughout the county, and that's where the building program got started and why it got started.
That's right. That's correct. Go ahead,
On my
Nisha.
road,
Go ahead, go.
on my road, there's children that go to Leoma that, the way the route goes, they're on the bus an hour and a half. How are you gonna send them to Loretto?
That's right.
We'll take Nikki and be the last one to move on.
Yeah, I didn't, it may be on here, but one thing I want to mention that hadn't been mentioned, that I'm strongly for Summertown High School in their basket. They need a basketball gym somewhere. It's not on here, I know, but they need a basketball gym at Summertown High School. And Lawrenceburg needs a basketball auxiliary gym. That's two things. And you can put your classrooms in the basketball gym. Those two things need to happen.
Okay, moving on to 4, fiscal year 24 ESSER public feedback and comment.
So while we were here talking about the strategic plan, I just thought we would kind of put this in there with it so we don't have to meet and have a working session on ESSER again. We haven't wrapped up completely ESSER for the year and got our exact carryover amount, but we're gonna still have about $10 million for next year. When you look at it. We have expended ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, which is kudos to Lawrence County School System, because there are some school systems that are still trying to spend ESSER 2.
Did I understand
quickly.
you right? That just kind of slipped by me. You still have $10 million of ESSER money to spend, not in this coming school year.
23, school year 23, 24. When you think about it, this is what we had. ESSER 1, we had 1.6 million, ESSER 2 was 6.9, and then ESSER 3 was 15.6. So that's how the federal funds that have come in.
And we have spent all of 1 and all of 2 successfully, and we've got just under 10 million of this 15 left.
Yes, sir.
Which I think, is that September 24 that has to be?
Yes, sir.
So we've got to.
What happens if it's not?
We have to send it back to the state.
No, we're not doing that.
No, we have a
I
plan.
just wondered what the penalty, so they make you send it back.
That's one of the first questions I asked Mrs. Ridgway, what happens if we don't spend it? She says we send it back, so we'll spend it.
We'll
China
get there.
had to give theirs back.
We're not giving
We'll
up.
get there.
Go ahead, Nikki.
I've got a dumb question, but I'm sitting over here wondering, and what does that ESS, those stand for?
ESSER is the Educational Savings.
If you would have asked us when it first came
When
out,
it
we
first
told you.
came out, we could have told you.
But now that we don't deal with it as much,
3 years
it's
ago.
emergency relief, isn't it?
What does it stand for?
Yeah. Elementary and secondary school emergency relief.
Yes,
Say that again.
Elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds.
so that's all of the COVID dollars that came down. So we have, so far, this is the list that we've spent on academics. This is approximately $11 million. And then student readiness, these are things that we've purchased so far with our ESSER 1, 2, and partial 3. 2 years ago, we did the COVID compensation for the teachers that everybody got a bonus. And then these are some foundational things that we have been able to purchase so far. When you look at the remaining $10 million, so there are still requirements that we have to follow the guidelines. All of the funding still has to be related to COVID. We still can't just purchase, it's not just money that we can purchase anything that we want with. Still has to be related to COVID. So as Mr. Atkins mentioned, the interventionist is something that our principals have said that's made an impact on our students. So this year, what we've done is those K-8 schools, instead of getting 1 interventionist, they're going to get 2 interventionists. 1 interventionist will focus on K-2, and the other focus will be 3-4 to reflect the 3rd grade law. All the principals understand that that is a 1 year, those 2 positions are for 1 year only. They are out of relief funding. So unless we find a way to sustain that through TISA dollars or other federal dollars, those, right now, those positions are 1 year positions only. We've also got in our budget to provide some instructional supports. We're going to finish out the roofs. We've talked about the timeline for the roofs. That has to be finished by 2024, or we can't use these funds to finish it out, which they are on schedule. Last I talked to Jessica and Mr. Tucker, they are on schedule to finish those.
With Mr. Atkins, with what you just mentioned, Katie, and what we talked about to J.C. Barnett, I mean, is it not needing a roof, and can this money not go to these updates at J.C. Barnett?
Well, on ESSER 3, they capped what you could spend. On the first two, they did not, but on the third one, they did, because we had plans to address that building over there on ESSER 3.
Well, they've capped per facility, you can only spend X amount in one facility.
Well, X
overall.
amount on capital projects.
That, we didn't know that when we were first budgeting and planning, but J.C. Barnett was on there to be addressed and fixed through.
Are we
federal.
gonna look to spend to fulfill that cap on J.C. Barnett?
Well, that's going to be a discussion, because it's the cost and everything else that we have going. That's why I said the board will have to take a look at that, the investment there, or the investment on the north, or the southeast, or central. I mean, it's a challenge.
And one of the things you have to look at when you're doing capital projects with federal funds is the Davis-Bacon Act. And so it costs more, a roof is going to cost more using these ESSER funds than it would be if we utilized other funds.
Because it costs the contractor more to
That's right.
get the
Yes.
bid.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Ms. Ridgway,
Yes, sir.
now, I hear on the news all the time of school systems that have been given federal funds and they haven't spent them. So you're saying you have plans in mind, or y'all have plans in mind, so that at some point in time in the future, they're not gonna say, Lawrence County, give me that money back since you hadn't spent it.
Oh, absolutely.
You have plans to use it
Yes,
to
sir.
upgrade capital projects.
Well, the roofs, this is the
Yeah.
list. Capturing kids' hearts is something that all of our principals that implemented it last year, they want to continue that. So we're going to spend some funds to continue that. We have Boost, which is a K-5 literacy program that we're going to implement next year. It's going to replace one that we had called Smarty Ants. But Boost is a piece of our high-quality instructional material for ELA in the lower grades. So that will work together. So we're excited about that. We've been asked to continue Achieve 3000 by our principals, and so we're going to be able to continue that for one more year. That is an expense. We won't be able to fund that program again without some federal dollars, or without some extra dollars to continue that after 23-24. And we're going to, the educational technology platforms, that there's no what we call supplement, not supplant, with these federal dollars. So typically, if you pay for something out of general purpose funds, you can't pay for it the next year out of federal funds. But these dollars don't have that stipulation. So we were able to take some GP dollars, or save some GP dollars, to put some educational programs that we have been paying for in ESSER. So we'll continue that one more year.
And some of this federal money you have used for school buses.
Yes, sir, we bought
Yeah.
5 buses. We were told at the beginning that we would be able to do 6 years of the math adoption, that we were to set aside all of the funding for the math adoption. Then we were told this year, when we got ready to adopt, that we could only pay for 2 years out of that. So what we've done, we paid for those 2 years, that's the plan. But then we've taken some of the new positions that were going to be in the GP budget, and we're now putting those in the ESSER budget to offset what we're going to have to pay for the math adoption out of GP.
So did they change? I mean, did they change their mind, or did somebody give you misinformation, or how
They
did you go
told-
from 6 to 2?
Yeah.
And it was argued.
Yes, okay.
It was, it was argued multiple times between the directors, between the federal programs directors. We questioned multiple times. The key, they say, is that we could buy all of the manipulatives, and if all we were looking at were textbooks, we could buy those textbooks. But because those digital platforms, which is what everybody uses now, because those would extend past the end of the grant, so the grant ends in September of 2024, because those platforms that we would be using would go past 2024, we could not use dollars to pay for those going past those years.
That's a pretty big curveball, wasn't it?
It was a big curveball. So it was a big curveball. But we put so now because there's no supplement, not supplant, we were able to take the social workers, the new social worker positions, the academic leads, a CTE position, and those dean of students. We're able to take those positions, and that equaled what will come out of now the GP fund for the math adoption. So we're able to kind of shuffle those things around
But all these positions, we're gonna have to pick up
the next year.
the
Yes,
next
sir.
year out of our, and y'all's budget, I mean, that's planned for.
Yes. Which positions are you?
The social workers, the
Oh, yeah,
academic
yeah, yeah.
leads, the CTEs, and the dean
Yeah,
of students.
yes, those we have, but now that group of interventionists that we talked about for 1 year,
Right.
that's where we will be looking at trying to find dollars to keep that, because the elementary principals have said to us numerous times, this is really working. We would lose that all-core tutoring at
Yes,
some
10
point.
all-core tutoring, which is what we feel is made part of our third grade gains, because we've been able to do that tutoring. That will completely go away after next year. We won't get the funding from the state from that, and we won't have the ESSER dollars. That's a partnership with the state. The state gives us $700 per student, and then we take $800 out of our ESSER funds to make $1,500 per student. So it's a partnership with the state with their ESSER dollars. But we're going to purchase a benchmark assessment, and then through the innovative dollars, some schools got some robotic equipment and greenhouses. So those schools that did not get those robotics and greenhouses, then we're going to hopefully, I'm going to write that into the grant. Remember, it's got to relate to COVID. So I'm going to write that into the grant to hopefully get those schools that equipment as well. Mr. Atkins has seen the virtual goggles at Ingram South.
Ingram South, yeah.
And we would like to see those in the other elementary schools as well. The audio enhancement equipment that we purchased, y'all voted on, I don't know, 2 or 3 board meetings ago. We have had huge reviews from teachers on that say they would never want to teach again without it, and the impact that it's had on their students. I've had multiple teachers come and say, when are you doing another round of purchasing? How can I get that equipment? So we've planned to set aside some dollars for that. We've also got a few dollars for summer learning. We put a lot of money aside for this summer and next summer, but at that point in time, the governor had not put into his budget for summer learning, so we thought those dollars were going away. So we've kind of backed off on how much we're going to put in summer learning, but we're still going to put some towards summer learning.
So I see you only have the CTE positions for Miss Watson. Is that all that she's going to need? Because, I mean, I'm sure that program could use a little extra money too, or, I mean, more Suburbans for her or something? I don't know.
That was a new position
Okay.
that we just added to ESSER to offset the math adoption coming out of the GP fund. So she has other things that
Okay.
she's being
She's
allocated.
utilizing.
That was one way that we could offset those dollars.
Ms. Ridgway,
Yes,
by,
sir.
by the way, if you need any help spending that money, I live with a professional spender.
You're a professional
No,
spender.
not me, I live with one.
Oh, you live with one.
Yeah, you
She
count
has
me in
no-
on that one too.
She has no problem with that.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
Well, if we could spend it any way we wanted to spend it, that might be a little different, but I'm really hoping to write it so that the greenhouse and the robotics can be put in, but it does have to relate to COVID.
He has, that tutoring program, what did that cost?
The 10 all-core, it's $1,500 per student. 700 of that comes from the state, and 800 of that comes from our ESSER dollars. Each school committed to tutoring so many students, and the state allowed us to do as many as they wanted to.
Oh, okay.
So they committed to tutoring so many students, and then I allocated them that pot of money, and then they filled those positions as it worked for their schools. Some of them did retired teachers, some of them did educational assistants, and then some of them actually put certified teachers. The most progress we've seen are from those students that were tutored during the day.
Yeah.
The before and after school tutoring is great, but the biggest impact comes when they're tutored during the day.
Thank you.
And I will say this, and I think you folks have witnessed it here tonight with Mrs. Ridgway and Mrs. Elledge, in the way that they understand federal dollars, state dollars, the general purpose budget. I'm in their offices a lot, and they educate me on a lot of this, but they have plans. They don't come to me with a problem without there being a solution. And I think the great work that's taking place in Lawrence County, the board being responsible for that, but having good people who say, we can move these dollars and do this, and this helps our kids, and we can get this dollars over here to get more social workers, to get greenhouses, robotics for schools that we fought hard to get extra dollars for that did not exist at the time that now do exist, and we're not going to let those kids go without in that community. So very blessed to have both of those ladies working with us and managing all of this. This is work. It's a full-time job by itself, but Mrs. Ridgway, Mrs. Elledge do other things too. So very appreciative of the great work they do for us.
Any other further questions? Are you done?
I'm
You
finished, I'm
You
good.
We wanted to get this to them so that we could
Well,
start.
we just wanted to make sure, I have to, part of the requirements of federal funds is to cross all the Ts and dot all the Is. So part of that is that you were part of the working session and able to give feedback and suggestions to the ESSER plan, so.
Well, I'll make one statement, and I too echo Mr. Atkins and you and Jessica and what y'all do and y'all's knowledge and how y'all present the material to us. I mean, y'all do a great job. I appreciate it. From a board member's perspective and representing my constituents in the north end of the county, and also as a taxpayer, you know, sometimes I feel like we look at federal funds and we look at state funds and we're like, oh, well, this is federal money. Look, it is still my tax dollar. And I just want to make sure, and this statement doesn't, by no means am I saying that we're not. I just want to get it out there. I don't want to waste money just because it's federal money to waste.
Absolutely, you're right.
You know, if we're spending it, we need to make due diligence and make sure that we're buying stuff that's going to be used and going to benefit our students and our teachers. And not just spend it just because if we don't, we got to send it back. Well, look, if we're good and we can't spend it all, send it back. I mean, let's not just go waste it, because it is still taxpayer dollars. I mean, it's mine and your taxpayer dollars. They're one of them.
Well, and you can ask Mr. Atkins when he came. You know, Mr. McDaniel was here when the first CARES Act started, and then transitioned, and it was Mr. Atkins. And so when we decided to purchase some programs, I said, okay, I don't want to purchase these just for the sake of purchasing them. Are they non-negotiables? And Mr. McDaniel said, yes, they're going to be non-negotiables. The principals voted on them. This is what they said they wanted, so now they're non-negotiables. So when Mr. Atkins came on board, I went to him and I said, are these non-negotiables? Because if they're not, then let's take them off the table. Because I've seen too many programs or too many things sit on a shelf or not be used, or, you know.
By no means was that an accusation that said.
No, I'm just, I agree with you.
I just want to
mean,
make sure.
I completely
Make sure
agree
that, I
with
don't know
you.
if this is going on the web or whatever, make sure that people know that we're not just spending money just because we've got to spend, I mean. So thank you again for y'all's job, and you too, Mr. Atkins, appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Can
Go
I
ahead, Royce.
can I just make a
Yes, go ahead.
statement? You know, from everything I'm seeing here, we're either trying to intervene early, right?
Yes.
Identify problems early intervention, and then provide materials that actually boost the interest of students. And I think all the educational research would show that if a student comes to school and he's involved in something at school, he's going to be much better. He's going to be a lot more successful in the overall program. Am I right about that?
Yes, sir.
Everything I've ever read will show that. Are we doing anything? I know we're spending a lot of money on all these different little areas, and it just seems like it's kind of, it could be hit and miss. And are we doing anything to actually target? Let's say, let me give an example. Let's say we've got a kid that comes to school and he's really interested in basketball. He gets on the basketball team. He just thrives in everything, you know. Comes to school for basketball, but he does all the other stuff so he can play basketball. Okay, are we targeting these kids that are coming to school without that interest to try to direct them? I mean, specifically.
Specifically.
Grabbing the kid by the collar and saying, listen, you know, we want you to be successful. We want you to get involved in something. And we're going to help you do that. Are we doing that?
I would say most. I'm going to say that varies with teacher. You know, when you look at the teacher, I think, I'm speaking
Go
for,
ahead.
but I mean, I think that through our greenhouses that are gonna be on every
See,
campus.
that's what, you know, and I think that's
Right.
perfect.
And then the robotics.
Yeah.
All of them have this, you've seen the STEM things that are going on.
Drones.
Drones. You know, I really think we are.
But we're really keeping an eye on that kid that could slip through the crack.
We're
The one that
trying our
kind of
best.
scoots back and is not really involved in anything,
We're trying our best.
except for drugs.
Yeah. We universal screen 3 times a year for
Okay.
those, you know, academically.
I know Mr. Atkins and Mickey Dunn, y'all did a great job over at Lawrence County High School trying to involve, when I was working in the system, you know, involving those kids. You know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, exactly.
Mr. Nutter, the ag, the implementation of ag at Summertown
Exactly.
captured a lot of kids that otherwise were not involved.
And see, we pushed for that for years before that happened.
And then this welding, the CTE, the things that we're doing, I mean, the stories I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, because my kids are in those halls.
That's
I
exactly
can tell
right.
you that welding, ag, those things like that
And
have got
see,
a hold
our-
of kids that otherwise would have slipped through.
And our general idea, I don't know if this is still true, but years ago, was to get these middle schools in place where we could offer more of those specific programs to involve kids. That's still our goal.
That's still, yeah.
Okay.
And Mrs. Watson is doing that with
So if
the
somebody asks
greenhouses.
me,
yeah.
I can tell them
Yeah,
that.
that is, that's still underway. It's slower than we'd like, but it is still the plan to do.
E.L. Kaufman in the past had, their theme was, everybody is somebody. And they tried to get everybody involved.
Yeah,
in
that's what you
something.
have to do.
There's no question about it, a kid that's involved in a special activity they like doing at a school, they're gonna be a less discipline problem, because if you
Exactly.
take the activity away from them because of discipline, they're not gonna be a discipline
fixes
problem.
a lot
Whether
of
it be
things if we can
choir
just-
or band or cheerleading or
all
basketball,
of that stuff's
football,
important.
whatever.
I'll share this example with you. I was at Lawrence County High School this year doing something over there around lunchtime, and a young man had come in late or had detention or whatever it was, and he was doing everything he could to get that detention taken care of, that tardy taken care of, whatever it was that was going to prevent him from going to chess that afternoon. And he knew if he wasn't at school, he couldn't go to chess. And he came in late, but he was in a panic, and they were working with him so he could go to the chess club meeting. And I think that, what you're
That's
talking
what I'm
about,
talking
finding that one thing.
Very well.
Everybody is somebody.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Very productive meeting.
Very late.